the Public News Service Daily Newscast, November the 12th, 2020. I'm Mike Clifford. When the U.S. Congress convenes in January, a record number of women will be representing their states. Roz Brown has our report.
Republican and Democratic women elected this year also will witness another milestone when Kamala Harris becomes the first female and first black vice president. Kelly Dittmar with the Center for American Women in Politics says November 2020 was a watershed year for African Americans, Asian Americans, and other women who've long been excluded from many aspects of politics.
We did have a record number of Native American women who ran for office this cycle for the U.S. House, and we tracked that over the course of the election cycle, noting the importance of that in diversifying the pool of women who run.
New Mexico's Deb Haaland, a Democrat, retained her seat, while Democrat Teresa Fernandez will be the first woman and Latina to ever represent northern New Mexico in Congress. In New Mexico's 2nd congressional district, Republican Yvette Herrell defeated the Democratic incumbent to win her first term representing the state.
We should note that despite the gains, women still will represent less than a quarter of the seats in the House and the Senate. CNBC reports President Trump met with top election advisors Wednesday as his chances for reversing an apparent win for President-elect Joe Biden in the race for the White House looked increasingly daunting. Wednesday's meeting came as NBC News reported there is growing expectation among Trump's advisors he will never concede that he lost to Biden, even when ballots are certified in coming weeks around the country. A top aide told NBC, "Do not expect him to concede. He'll likely say something like, 'We can't trust the results, but I'm not contesting them.'" Election officials across the U.S. say there is no evidence of illegal votes helping Joe Biden win the 2020 presidential race. Mike Bowen reminds us President Trump and some allies are still floating those baseless claims.
Governor Kristi Noem, a staunch Trump supporter, is among those echoing sentiments from his camp. University of South Dakota political scientist Julia Hellwig says on the surface, people might view what's happening as typical behavior from the past 4 years and think it will go away with Biden assuming the office. But she says there could be a lasting effect.
Democracy doesn't just disappear. We don't just turn off a switch. What we know from our studies of democracy is that it's this sort of slow chipping away of first the normative behaviors and then the institutional procedures.
Hellwig says democracy is more than casting your ballot. She notes the bar should be much higher, including a peaceful transfer of power, which doesn't appear likely in the presidential race. According to polling from The Economist and YouGov, 86% of Trump supporters don't think Biden won the race legitimately.
Today, following Veterans Day, a diverse coalition of veterans, sports people, elected officials, ranchers, and small business owners coming together to advocate for the Colorado Outdoor Recreation and Economy Act. Here's Lily Bohlke.
The bill would designate roughly 400,000 acres as protected public land, including Camp Hale, the country's first National Historic Landscape, to honor 10th Mountain Division veterans who trained there during World War II. It would also protect the Thompson Divide area of the White River National Forest from oil and gas development. Bill Fales owns Cold Mountain Ranch in Carbondale, and his cattle graze on the Thompson Divide.
The entire community really values that piece of the forest. There's a huge amount of recreation, a huge amount of hunting, a huge amount of snowmobiling.
Fales says it's a grassroots and bipartisan effort based on the grazing allotments ranchers want to protect, as well as all the other uses of these public lands.
The last major Colorado lands bill was passed along with the National Defense Authorization Act back in 2015. An author in Maryland, who's also a leader of a national anti-poverty group, is challenging U.S. leaders to tackle social inequality spotlighted this year by the coronavirus and protests against policing. Wes Moore notes that families who live with food insecurity, lack of health care, crumbling schools, and lack of internet are even worse off now.
Poverty doesn't discriminate how it shows itself. It shows itself in every single way. And therefore, that's how we have to think about this idea of creating economic opportunity for people, to be able to make sure that it's not just eliminating one facet of the way poverty shows itself, but eliminating every facet.
Now that the 2020 election is over, anti-poverty fighters are pushing Congress to pass a new stimulus package to at least get folks through this pandemic-related downturn. Finally, one of the most frequently visited ports in North Carolina has improved a prized natural resource. We get more on that from our Nadia Romlagan.
Grassy Creek, which flows through Pilot Mountain State Park, was severely eroded. Ken White of Resource Institute, a Winston-Salem-based nonprofit that restores streams, rivers, and wetlands, says they used sustainable river engineering technologies to improve natural stream stability.
But to go out and spend a day on the Blue Ridge Parkway and see the throngs of people that are out enjoying the trailheads, it really makes you appreciate what we can do.
Stream restoration not only keeps sediment and debris out of local waterways that supply drinking water, but also can prevent storm runoffs and damage from flooding. This is Mike Clifford for Public News Service, member and listener supported, heard on great radio stations across the nation, and viewed on Free Speech TV.